I'm Cris Rowan. I'm a pediatric occupational therapist, biologist, author of the book Virtual Child, and an international speaker on the topic of the impact of technology on children. I come to you today to talk about the growing use of technology in school-based settings. We all know and understand that technology has tremendous promise. There is so many things that children can do with technology today that they couldn't so many years ago. This is something that technology we should be looking toward as this is our children's future. But there are also perils that come with overuse of technology, and that leads us toward the understanding that we really have to know what those perils are in order to be able to judiciously use technology in a school-based setting, and to be able to choose what do children really need the human blood teacher for, and what can technology do that the teacher can't. As well, we need to look at the who, what, when, where, why, and how of the user. So this is a term in research circles is called differential susceptibility. So different children are all different. Some children are going to respond really positively to the use of education-based technology. Other children who are already overusing and are have a probable technology addiction they don't have the brain that is capable of absorbing information through technology. So when we're moving forward with technology, we really have to start grouping our kids into different areas. And teachers know how to do this really well in the sense of looking at outcomes. So when a teacher uses a piece of technology in their classroom, and the children assimilate that information, they organize it, they memorize it, and they can apply it in different realms. They can conceptualize that information so that they can actually use that information to further their education. Then that is an appropriate use of that piece of technology. But if children are simply absorbing factoids, or they're skipping from different screens and just scanning, what's happening is that the brain is not it doesn't have enough time to literally absorb that information and make it and assimilate it and make it applicable in different realms. So I want to talk a little bit more about that in a bit. I'm going to come back to that concept of how do we know who, what, when, where, why, and how can we use this technology to best enable our children to succeed in not only school, but when they graduate and they move into a work-based setting. So one of the things a concept that I developed that's really helpful for teachers to understand is uh, that we want to create balanced technology use. So what that means is we need to balance technology with healthy activity, right? So when we have a balance of the two, then our children can grow and succeed, right? So we want to optimize development. We also want to optimize academic performance, right? And what are those critical factors? It's important to understand for parents and teachers. So there are four critical factors, four critical domains of activity that children need to participate in order to again grow and succeed. So it's sort of like think of it like a hierarchical triangle, child development, trying to get that straight, and the bottom piece is the foundation, right? And we want to build that foundation. We want to make that foundation solid so that the child can move up the hierarchical scale and be able to succeed academically, physically, socially. So what are those four critical factors? Movement, lots of movement. I'm going to talk about each one of these in depth. Touch. Children need to be touched and touch others. Rough and tumble play, hugs. Human connection, absolutely integral. We know without human connection or attachment that children die. And nature. Nature is so sensory soothing, attention restorative. It can actually counteract the effects of tech. So again, when we're thinking of this balanced scale, if we get all this movement, touch, connection, nature in that child, right, then we can use tech, right? But if that child's at a poverty of the critical factors for development, then that child really needs more of the movement, touch, connection, nature, right? Not more tech. So movement, what does movement do? Stimulates two systems, our vestibular and our proprioceptive systems. In addition to cardiovascular, we all know epidemic levels of obesity and diabetes are plaguing our children today, right? So there's the obvious cardiovascular effects of movement. But the other ones that are really important to understand from an academic perspective is vestibular system lives in the brain. It's a series of three canals. We often reference it as our inner ear. Those canals are angled in different planes to pick up movement in different planes, right? So when a child's on a swing, for instance, and they're swinging forward, the vestibular system actually kicks in and says, you're going to fall off that swing backward if you don't contract the whole front of your body. So the whole front of the body contracts, brings the child into core. The reverse happens when the child swings the other way. The vestibular stimulation is absolutely crucial for the development of core stability, for our core stabilizer muscles. When those develop, then we can start seeing motor coordination. So if we want to see coordination of both sides of the body, right to left, upper lower body, eye to hand, very, very important for printing, eye to eye, very important for reading. When we want to get those units to coordinate, then we need core. Children are not getting enough vestibular. They're very sedentary, and what we're seeing is huge problems with development. So not only with gross motor development, fine motor, speech, all of these are motor units that need strong core in which to develop. The second movement system, the proprioceptive system, is very important for development of refined movement. So the proprioceptive receptors are in the joints, the muscles, they're activated with heavy work. Think about 50 years ago what our kids were doing before they came to school. They were out, milking cows, hauling hay, chopping wood, plowing a few fields. They had lots of proprioceptive input to their bodies. And from that, then they were able to coordinate their motor movements, refine their motor movements. And this is something that, again, we're seeing a poverty of. The other thing that happens with proprioceptive work, heavy work, is there's an energy dump. It actually makes us feel kind of like in the zone. So it's why you go and you work out after work. It's why at a gym. It's why you might dig in a garden or go for a walk or go for a bike ride, or it's why we rough and tumble play with our kids, because there's an energy dump, and then they're better able to sit at the dinner table or go to bed and go to sleep. So movement's integral for not only physical development but also academic performance in the areas of reading and literacy. The second one, touch. I work with children and families, and I have never seen the level of touch deprivation that I'm seeing today. Children are not being touched enough from infancy. They're being put in front of these pads right up to, school entry. There's so much that happens with the skin. When we touch children, when we give children hugs, when we cuddle them, when children rough and tumble play, when they get down on the floor and they wrestle, the skin is getting stimulated, and it actually lowers cortisol and adrenaline. So if a child's in a very sympathetic charged state and they enact in some form of touch where they're getting their skin stimulated, you'll see them move into a parasympathetic calming. The parasympathetic system kicks in and it lowers cortisol and adrenaline. So when we see our hypercharged, hyperaroused children, touch can be a very effective modality to help them to calm down. Third, human connection. We know from orphanage studies, when we disconnect from a baby, an infant, a toddler, a child, then we're going to see behavior problems. And today, as more and more parents and teachers are attaching to their technology, they're detaching from the children. So whether it's in a home setting or a school-based setting, this isn't good. So when we see children who are having all these issues like children are having today, in Canada, 1 in 7 children have a diagnosed mental illness. In the States, it's 1 in 6. This is autism is 1 in 45 now. So these are all disorders that improve with human connection. So every time we hand a child a device who has a mental illness or is having a behavior issue, every time we hand them a device, we are disconnecting them from the human element, which is what they actually need in order to set their systems right and be able to pay attention and learn. The fourth, nature. So much research now on green space and being the most attention restorative agent that you have in your pocket as a teacher to be able to enable that child to learn. So when you take children outside, if you had like a one subject a day outside, I do a lot of school workshops and keynotes, one subject a day outside, and created a space, some covered space where there maybe is a great big fire pit, you know, that you had going all day. I know in many places in Canada there's inclement weather. If we create a space outside and we get those kids outside once a day, you will see a profound difference in their ability to pay attention and learn. Some of the other initiatives that I've helped create in communities are one is called Crash and Bump, where we set up some really cool stuff. We invest about $25,000 to run this program in a small community setting, and the whole hall is taken over for the whole day. There's huge bouncy castles. There's one huge bouncy castle and one smaller bouncy castle for the 0 to 3s. So there's platform swings and shrings and lycropod swings and obstacle courses and scooter boards and tramps. So it's a place where there's it's heavily supervised by 8 staff, and the children of the community come through there, you know, so that we have the 0 to 6s that come in the morning, and then the school age kids come in the afternoon, and then after school is the high school kids, and we shift up the equipment at 3 to be more challenging for the older kids. So this is an intervention that is working on all three, well, on 3 of those spheres, right? The movement, touch, connection, because it's sensory, motor, and attachment rich, this program. Garage gyms are another thing that I've been involved in, and I have little video clips of both of these on my website under media and videos. So Crash and Bump, garage gyms, creating, if you have a spare room in your, I know turf is tough to find in school settings, but if there is a room that we can put mats around on the floor, around the walls, and this would be something that would be there all the time. And then we have rings, we have with extra matting obviously under them, have to be safe. Can't put this stuff up and not be safe. So this would be a room that would be monitored, and may only be open for 4 hours a day, but where kids go down and they work out. There's TRX, slam balls, chin-up bars, climbing rope, the pilo boxes. It's kind of like you set up like a parkour setting inside a classroom in the school. And those kids who really need to get more of that movement, touch, connection are going at it. So this is the thing. This is again on this concept of balanced technology management. We're balancing attack with that movement, touch, connection nature by doing some of these initiatives. So 1 class a day outside, Crash and Bump, garage gyms, really looking at your playgrounds, making sure that there's actually stuff there for the 7-year-old and up, because this is frequently I see that there isn't. They need challenge or they're going to get in trouble. And schools that choose to allow kids devices at recess, is you're actively working against those 4 critical factors. So please understand that when you give a child a device, they're doing none of those. They're doing no movement, touch, connection, nature, right? You're disconnecting that child from the human element. They're becoming sedentary. They're isolated, right? They're isolated from their peers, and they're overstimulated. So this is, again, something that is really important to understand, is that when a child is using a device, they are in a hyper aroused state. They are in a sympathetic charged state. You see it. They get really excited, right? So got a lot of adrenaline, a lot of cortisol in that system, a lot of dopamine in the brain. Can this be good for learning? In short bursts, yes. It can actually create that curiosity and awareness. Long term, absolutely not, right? That system, what happens, it's called the HPA axis fatigue, is the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis starts to fatigue. And the child needs more and more and more of the stimulus to create that aroused state. So then you start seeing, you can watch kids, you start seeing them moving into kind of like low arousal, right? They start with high arousal, move into low arousal. Neither of those states long term are good for learning, right? So again, back to the judicious use of technology, absolutely crucial. So some of the other factors is that we worry about, with long-term tech use is it evidence-based? That particular piece of technology that you're using, does it have evidence to support that it is actually helping that child to learn? And again, thinking the differential susceptibility, thinking the who, what, when, where, why, how. So is the actual program or the curriculum that you're doing, is there any research that's not industry driven? Okay, so it's not research that came from the company that made the program. It's actually university driven, independent research. If the answer is yes, then that would probably be something that could really benefit that child, but not every child. Do you see what I mean? So we really have to look carefully when we're using this tech and determine what's right and what's not right. Nicholas Carr wrote an awesome book called The Glass Cage, and in it he said that we need to look at, in schools, what do the teachers do really well, and give that to the teachers, right? And then we look at, well, what do the teachers not teach very well, and can this piece of tech actually help with that? If it can, make sure it's got some evidence base, and then start looking at how do the children respond with this. Are you seeing retention, assimilation, application, real learning? Are they actually learning from that tech? Because we have this assumption, I call it the tech illusion, or this illusion that all tech is good, and that if the child is engaged in the tech, they must be learning, right? But this isn't the case. In fact, numerous studies are showing now that they're not. And I presented at this conference in California last month called, it was put on by the Institute for Digital Media and Child Development, of which I'm a committee member. And these were supported by the National Science Council. This was sponsored by the American Academy of Pediatrics. These are researchers from all over the world that were presenting research. And there was a big section on EdTech. And one of the researchers spoke about that she did a study where she asked grade 9s, she said, what do you learn better with? The pencil, paper, or tech? And 95.7% said pencil, paper, right? So this goes back to, we need to teach those kids how to print, right? I'm seeing what studies are showing is teachers are teaching printing on average 10 minutes a day in the K to grade 3 settings. When we don't teach children to print, then this is affecting all aspects of literacy, whether it's numerical literacy, printing literacy, reading literacy, is the action of making the letters. It's a motoric action, it's a motor skill. But it's also a visual skill. So the visual part of the brain, the occipital cortex, is kind of going like, okay, that's what an A looks like. That's what a B looks like. And if the teacher's doing multi-sensory teaching, then the teacher's saying, this is B and it stands for bat and it's the sound ba, and then the child picks up a book and they see the B and they go, oh, yeah, okay, it makes that ba sound. It actually helps them with reading. Math, absolutely huge. The importance of knowing how to print. And when I say knowing how to print, I'm saying like your motor output speeds are grade equivalent. And I've got a chart, email me, info@zonin, so info@zonein.ca, or if you're in the US, zonein.ca. Email me for this chart. It's Stephen Graham's research, and he did a motor output equivalent. And if you can test that, so simple with your classroom. You just get them to print for 2 minutes, copy print for 2 minutes, and you get them to count their letters, and then you look at Stephen Graham's chart and you can tell if your classroom's on or off. If a child doesn't know how to print, meaning their output speeds are really low, then when they're doing their math, every single time they go to make a number, like 4s are really hard for kids. And sometimes they confuse them with 7s for some reason, or 5s. And so if you see them struggling, stopping, erasing, asking you, is this a 5 or is this a 7? Then you know that like 95% of their brain is being allocated to for the motoric aspects of printing the numbers, and you've only got 5% left to do the math or the spelling or the sentence production, right? So we need to teach children to print, especially when we have 95.7% of our grade 9s saying they'd rather do that than actually use the computer. So, and this is something I could talk at length about this study. Email me and I'll send it to you. But these are things we should be asking our kids, right? We should be asking our classroom at the beginning of every year. First, we should be screening our kids. How much tech do you got on board? How much, like when you're walking into this classroom, are you up in the middle of the night? Do you have a device in your bedroom? Are you allowed to take a device in your bedroom? Where's the sleep deprivation level for those kids? That's really huge because we have kids falling asleep in class all the time and they are not learning, right? And handing them a device is going to exacerbate their learning difficulties, right? So, so we want to understand how much tech is on board, screen the kids for usage rates, and then do a little education so that they understand that you are trying to find out what's their best way of learning, and you can use that information hugely in your planning of when to use tech. So the last thing I just want to talk about is that again, we're on this peril thing. I'm sorry, I don't want to take all your time to talk about all the promise. So please understand that that this talk is really just about the peril, because I know you can go somewhere else and find all the promise. So again, the other factor that is becoming very worrisome in the medical and the pediatric research areas is the radiation that's being emitted by Wi-Fi devices. And we do know that in 2011, many people know this, the World Health Organization classified the electromagnetic radiation coming off all devices as a group 2B carcinogen, meaning a possible carcinogen. Now, the American Academy of Pediatrics has recently written to the Federal Communications Commission and the World Health Organization and presented more studies to them showing detrimental effect, long-term detrimental effect, because you understand cancer takes a long time, right, to develop, but actually showing cellular damage from radiation. So we really have to be very, very careful. I mean, back to Nicholas Carr's book, we want to be really careful, and we want to be doing with our children what we know how to do as a flesh and blood teacher really, really well. We want to use as much of us as we possibly can. And when there's a piece of tech that that is just going to like be the piece de resistance and, like really, really sink it in for your kids, then use that, right? But again, we want to be careful. Please understand that regarding the radiation piece, that our younger children have thinner skulls, so they absorb more of the radiation to the brain, more aqueous bodies, meaning more water in their bodies. So again, they absorb more radiation in their bodies. They also have very high cell turnover. So as the body and the brain grow, this process slows down and becomes probably more, I can't say this for sure, but probably more resilient to the impact of the radiation. So what we want to do is go back to if we're going to do judicious use, that might be 2 Ethernet plug-in computers in your classroom. There's fiber optic cables is something that's new that's coming out. There's also something called Light-Fi, and it's actually using a solar panel to absorb light and power devices. So I think we are moving toward something else other than wireless radiation. Research is in its infancy, but at this time there is a potential peril that we really need to address. I have a tremendous amount of information on my website about electromagnetic radiation. I really encourage you to learn more about it and make the choice to be more cautious, especially with our younger kids. So those precautions would be more with the younger kids, and then grow more lenient as the children reach grade 12. But But to have, especially in our elementary settings, to have to go back to Ethernet plug-in at this point or up to cable uh, in order to wait for more research. Because if this does move to the group 2A carcinogen, it will be a probable carcinogen, and we are then putting our kids at risk. So, so again, just everything I'm saying is back to balancing, choosing what is really, really the most important way to learn for your children. One of the things to bring forward is the PISA scores. The 2012 PISA scores were not great. Canada dropped out of the top 10 to place 13th. And these are science, reading, and math. International studies, 65 different countries participate. The US has held even at 27th. So whatever we're doing over the last 3 years, has not really resulted in improvement. So really focus on outcomes, focus on using tech that has research to back it, focus on measuring your kids, like did they actually do well with that piece of tech. I work in schools, so I mean, I'm your best advocate. I am such a teacher advocate, but when I walk in a classroom and the kids who all have learning difficulties and ADHD and autism, whatever, and in the corner with a device, and I go and I say, "Hey, what are you doing?" and they don't even know, it's not the best thing for those kids. I do see a future in outdoor schools, a huge future in outdoor schools for those kids. So where we're getting them out in nature, we're getting them moving more touch, more human interaction is what really, our kids who are struggling need. So up on the Sunshine Coast where I live in Seychelles, 2 of our schools have outdoor schools. For more kids are having more problems with learning behaviors, and so I do see that kind of being a big part of our future. But you can right now take your class outside, one subject a day. What do you want to measure? Measure their ability to attend. How can you do that? Very simply, you can email me for a little simple graph, but you measure their ability to get started on a task, maintain focus on the task, and complete the task. 3 things. You can do it on a linear scale where the kid measures 0 to 10. You can measure the whole class 0 to 10, on how well each of those 3 things. So again, it's get started, and that's a tough one for some kids because they have to be able to pay attention to be able to get started on a task, maintain focus, and complete task. So thank you so much for listening to me today. And please contact me if you have any questions at info@zonin.ca. I'm very happy to come and talk to your school. I've done a lot of remote where it's Skype, where presentations to school boards around this subject. So I'm very supportive of helping teachers and schools to understand this complexity around tech and to work again toward this balanced technology management concept. I think it's gonna really work in our school-based settings. So thank you. And you can see from my Christmas tree, it's Christmas. So Merry Christmas, and to all you teachers, have a wonderful holiday, and hope you have a great 2016 year. Bless you.